In the last video, we said that prophecy isn't all apocalyptic, end of the world stuff. And in order to get a good idea of what prophecy is, we talked about what a prophet does, and that he's a spokesperson for God. And then we talked about the various ways that God can use a prophet, and we said there's 4. The first 2 is some kind of a message where God comes to the prophet and gives him a message. And we said it could either be verbatim, he wants the prophet to repeat something verbatim to somebody else, or you can give him a concept, a warning, and the prophet is to go out and convince the audience of whatever that message is. Then we said that the life of a prophet himself is a message when God instructs a prophet to go do something. For example, in the Hosea, when Hosea is commanded to marry a prostitute, his relationship with his prostitute wife is an example or illustrates the way Israel is unfaithful to God. And so the life of a prophet can be illustrative of spiritual truth and the message itself. And then finally we said that God can give visions to prophets, and then the visions themselves will speak of something in the future, or whether it's immediate or in the distant future. And that's the message the prophet has, is that vision. So those are different ways. Now that's how God uses a prophet person, the office of prophet. Obviously, we're not studying people, we're studying genres or literature. And so having that understanding of how a prophet works, now it's time to look at literature. So I'm going to bring on the screen here, and I want to show you a couple things about prophecy. I'm going to go to Isaiah here. Now, if you pick up any hermeneutics book, prophecy is its own genre. I tend not to think of it as a genre of prophecy. I'd rather suggest that prophecy is a collection of various types of literature with various types of genres. For example, here in the book of Isaiah, if you kind of scroll through Isaiah, or if you've got your physical Bible in front of you, it's one incredibly long poem. And so in this case, prophecy is a lot of poetry. But then we go to Jonah, and it's one story. And in fact, that's the example we use when we were talking about historical narratives. If we move on to Daniel now, Daniel is a collection of both narratives and poetry. So one of the reasons we set prophecy off until the end is because in order to understand prophecy, you really have to understand the other genres, because prophecy includes them all. We're going to see elements here of poetry, we're going to see narratives, historical narratives, and even a lot of the concepts we gleaned from when we were studying letters, even though letters aren't really a part of prophecy, but some of those concepts like flow of thought are going to be important when we study prophecy. So anyway, I like to suggest that prophecy isn't so much a genre in itself as it is a mixed bag of all kinds of different genres. Now, to complicate things a little more, I just said that prophecy isn't itself a genre, but a collection of genre. As prophecies aren't necessarily, like if we're to pick one prophetic book like Daniel, it's not just one prophecy about one thing, or a set of prophecies that have one idea behind them. Isaiah, Daniel, these different longer prophetic books tend to be a collection of prophecies from the prophet's entire life. And so they'll span not just a single event, but multiple events with multiple audiences and multiple goals. And so when you sit down to read Daniel or Isaiah or whatever prophet, you got to come at it with an understanding of these are different prophecies for different times, and it really is just a mixed bag of all kinds of prophetic literature, because not only are there different prophecies from different times, but they're in different genres. And so really prophetic books are difficult for those two reasons. Now, one of the things I do want to encourage you though is, remember we talked about historical narratives. And we said that on the historical side of historical narratives, the author picks either dimensions or events that have a common theme through them that the author's trying to communicate. And that is true also of prophecy. For example, in Daniel. Now, Daniel is a collection of Daniel's visions, of messages, of narratives, and they're from different time periods, with different kings in charge, with different purposes each. But Daniel, it seems like, and there's enough structure to support the idea, that Daniel didn't just pick random visions and random stories. He picked them because they have one theme behind them. And so overall, they have a really strong purpose. And when you look through the collection of prophecies within Daniel, it seems like what Daniel is really trying to communicate is that God is sovereign and in control of all of human history. And that really seems to be the theme throughout. And so from the beginning, from the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you've got all this collection of events, stories, and visions that really make this point. So all that to say this, when you open up Daniel, you first have to be conscious of the individual genres within it. So you look at it, am I reading a narrative? Am I reading a poem? Obviously, if you're reading a poem, you're going to use the questions we asked ourselves when we're reading poetry. If you're looking at a narrative, then you're going to decide whether it's more historically based or character based. And then you're going to interpret each one of those events in its own right to understand it. What's the point of this story? What's the author saying in this poem? What's this vision getting at? And then once you're done interpreting the various sections, then you've got to look at the whole thing and ask yourself, is there a theme here? And that's really the big question. So with prophecy, we're looking at two dimensions of it. One is the individual prophecies themselves, and then what is the theme joining them all together. So as you can see, prophecy can be a little tricky. Now, I want to make one other general point before we really start getting into prophecy more specifically, and before I give you real detailed tips about how to read prophecy. And that is, prophecy tends to be very historically based. You could get away with not using commentaries, maybe with the Gospels. Maybe in Acts, you could get away without using a commentary. But when you get into prophecy, the author is assuming that you are so familiar with history that if you're not, you're going to have a really difficult time reading it, because as poetry, it's really the most difficult of elements of poetry and historical narratives put together. The author is just assuming you know what he means when he talks about Ephraim or Teman, and he'll just go on using these words, and he'll assume that you can make the connection between Ephraim and the situation they were in the 8th century BC. And if you don't know Israel's history, then that's not going to make any sense to you. So it's really important that you understand how historically steeped prophecy is, and that you're very comfortable going to a library or having commentaries available on your computer at home that you can access to understand why the author is saying what he's saying, to understand the historical context in which he is writing. So that's kind of my final caveat there. Essentially, if I was going to summarize this video in just a couple words, it's prophecy. It's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag of genres. It's a collection of different events from different time periods, and it's very historically based. So you've got to have good commentary set aside to help you to understand it.